Welcome today. This is the second workshop of the Policy and Regulation. And I will start with the introductory slides. Some of you, this is a bit, let's say, a repetition from yesterday, but then I'll walk through the agenda for today, and then we'll start the introductions. Right.
I just came out of home and decided it was anyway. So I started prepping for the session tomorrow.
That's where we see. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. All right. You should see the presentation now. Do you?
Correct.
All right. Good. So, as mentioned earlier, this is the second presentation of the series of seminars for the Policy and Regulation, which are ongoing this and the next 2 weeks. And my name is Lucia Rakočević. I'll be your moderator and the host for today. I'm coming from Tinky. I'm R&D manager at Tinky. And Tinky, together with 3 and Econolair, is a consortium that has been contracted by the GO program to implement the energy transition community. And the training is part of the program. There are 2 dedicated online trainings that are focusing on political, legislative, regulatory, institutional framework, and they are a set of 8 trainings that will be happening, which I'll walk through in a minute. The idea of the trainings is really to go through sort of challenges, some of the gaps in legislation and regulation that provide some examples that where people have faced these challenges, but also provide some levers for action and good practices that can be followed for the development, implementation, monitoring, and evaluation of energy transition, public policies, and associated measures. After the training, as it's been the case yesterday, if you were participating with us yesterday, you will receive the recording of this training, and you will also receive a feedback form, evaluation form, so you can let us know what would you like to see more or less, or how you like the workshop. We have already received some of your feedback from yesterday, and we have tried to shape the workshop today so that it's more towards towards the feedback that we received from you. So as I mentioned, there is 8 workshops, as you probably know, yeah, and we're now in the second workshop, which is in the energy policy cycles phase. And we'll be presenting the different cycles of the policy and also some examples. We'll also have a presentation from our guest speaker, Shakil, and I'll present him later on in the coming days. So tomorrow we'll have the 3rd workshop on the institutional framework and stakeholder coordination. And then the next week we go into implementation and action plans, and then monitoring and evaluation. And then in the 3rd week, we'll be stepping into more regulation, where we discuss the regulatory principles. We discuss also the tariffs, the utility rate design, and customer response to them. And then finally, the regulation for renewable energy and energy efficiency. So to go through what today's agenda will look like. So for the next 2 hours, we'll be working together here in this workshop. First, I'm just having these presentation slides, letting you know what is going on. Then we'll have an interactive tour de table, and let's see how that works for all of us. It's a bit different than what we have done yesterday. And then we'll have a presentation from Len Peters on the introduction to policy cycles, and then interactive discussion together with her on how those policy cycles can be implemented through what we already discussed in the introductions. And then we'll have the presentation from Shakil Bedassi from Climate Finance, who is a climate finance consultant at the African Development Bank, and he'll be talking about the example of Mauritius. And then we'll have some time for questions and discussion with Shakil, and then we'll go into the policy cycles with some examples. Len will come back with some examples, and then we have some closing remarks from my side. So hope this is okay for everybody. And we start with the interactive tour de table. So let me stop sharing the presentation. So the way that we are planning to do this is through Miro board. I don't know if you're familiar with the Miro platform. Miro platform is an interactive web platform where we'll share the link in the chat here. Hopefully my colleagues will share it.
Contact, can you share it?
I can also try to share, but I'm not sure that's the, okay,
The right
good.
link, yeah.
So Quentin has shared with you links to the Miro board. You can access the Miro board and see what I'll be sharing with you on the slides now. You can also walk into the Miro board and interact together with me. So let's see. You don't see the Miro board anymore, right?
Yeah, we do.
You do, okay.
Yeah, we see the Miro board. Yeah.
I'm trying to get it on a bigger screen. Okay, good. So this is the Miro board that we have prepared for today for sort of both interaction between you and us, but also understanding and putting down some of the tangible points from your perspective on the energy transition on your islands. So we have put down all the islands here, all the 15. And we'll ask representatives that are present here with us to either join on the Miro board or orally communicate with us and discuss a bit. So the first part is on energy policy goals. We have already pre-filled what is your current share of renewables, where we could find this, of course, and what is the goal for the share of renewables on your islands by 2030 or 2050, depending. And we wanted to discuss with you on what are key challenges that you are sort of facing in the energy transition? And if you could tell us 2 to 3 key challenges. We have on the side provided some suggested, let's say, challenges, but this is not limited. So for example, a challenge could be budget for implementation, or it could be implementation of electric mobility, such as electric vehicles. It could be decreased income of oil-related companies, or public acceptance of renewables, or people cannot themselves invest in solutions, renewable solutions, or smart meters for own production are not available, or there is a challenge for their implementation. There is a challenge with land ownership. There is no regulation for decentralized energy production. And you can, as you see, I see some people are
moving,
moving things around. So you can move, these are the little post-its, and you can move them and put them under your island if you want to do that yourself, or we'll walk through, I'll walk with you by each of the islands. You present yourself, who's present here from the representatives, and you let me know 2 or 3 key challenges, and then we'll put them on the map for you. So maybe if that's okay for you, could we start with Anguilla, please, and the representative?
Lucia, can you make it a bit bigger? It could be me, but it's on a small side.
Yeah, it's small anyway. So, okay, is that a little bit better?
Yeah.
All right.
Saba is already doing a good job.
Yeah, I see that. All right, so we're at Anguilla. Is there representatives here with us today? If you are, please unmute yourself and let us know who you are. Okay.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hey, hello.
Hello. Hi.
Yeah, Travis Scott Anguilla.
All right.
I just got the link open actually.
Okay.
So, and it's a little small.
Yeah, it's a little small, but you can also tell me what do you see from your perspective are the biggest challenges, and I can move it around for you. Can you hear me?
He drops out sometimes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. So if you had to say what are the 2 or 3 key challenges for energy transition on your island, what would you say they are?
Well, definitely one of the challenges would be everything has a budgetary implications, you know. So the budget.
Okay.
And
it doesn't have to be limited to these. If you have something else, we can add it.
Oh, cool. We have, how much, what do you want me to list? 2?
2 or 3?
The next challenge by
If you were given, let's say, 100 million and you need to solve the problem, where would you put it?
If you were given, can you repeat that?
Yeah, I said if you're given 100 million and you have to solve the problem, where would you put it on?
Oh, most definitely training.
Training, okay.
Most definitely training
All
and some infrastructure in terms of
right.
one of the challenges also is
Needed infrastructure, do you mean like a grid infrastructure?
yes.
Okay. All right. So we have 3. Are you happy with those?
I'm happy with those here for now.
All right, good. Thank you. All right.
Your 100 million is gone now.
I know that's a good infrastructure.
That went fast. All right. Then we go to Aruba. I see you're already helping us here. So maybe could you unmute yourself and let us know who you are? And maybe if you have more colleagues here, you can present yourself.
Hi, good
Hello.
afternoon.
Good afternoon.
My name is Gail Adams from the Department of Economic Affairs
All right.
for the Unit of Sustainable Development Planning. And yes, I've put here the national indicators to monitor because sometimes we don't have set baselines everywhere. Sometimes you want to do a project, there are great ideas, but there are no data or
Yeah.
the way to get to the data. The public acceptance is also an issue, and the budget for implementation. It
Okay.
is something, yeah, I think for all the islands an issue.
All right. And I see you have a 4th posted. Is there something else brewing, or it was one of your colleagues?
No, it was me, but let
Okay.
me think what it was again.
Yeah. All right. Well, if something else comes up, you're free to add it here as well.
Yes.
All right. And of course, if you think that the current status for percentage of renewables or a goal that we have in there is not correct, please feel free to correct it or let me know and I can do that. Yeah.
Yeah, it came to my mind. It is the specific objectives.
Okay.
Because a lot of time there are
you mean in action plans,
but they're very broad.
Yeah.
And what sometimes we are missing what is a more specific percentage that you want to increase or decrease, or what do you want to the targets.
Yeah. I think that's also aligns indeed with the monitoring and the baseline that you mentioned.
Correct. Yes.
All right, thank you. Are we happy with that? Is that, I mean, we're obviously it's challenges, we're not happy with them, but can we go to the next one? That's my question. Yes? All right. Ascension, I see you already filled out some of the post-its, so maybe representatives, could you please unmute yourself and let us know who you are? You've been very busy, so.
Hello, I'm Tiffany from Ascension Island Government. I think Khushbu's on as well, putting some post-its on. I was just trying to look at our sustainability strategies to try and get a reminder of how much our sustainable energy is currently. I can't find the number, but we do have some wind turbines on island, and we have some solar power. Okay. And the goal for us is to get to 100% renewables by 2040.
Okay. Do you know approximate value for maybe, and I assume this is 100% in electricity, right? Or,
that's right.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. I would say just ballpark guess at the moment would be about 20. I think that's where we're at now. Yeah. Using our resources better and would need increased battery storage for the wind turbines and a battery system to regulate it. And that would allow us to use a lot less diesel in the current system.
Okay. And I see you put in as challenges. Maybe you want to discuss them briefly?
So I've put in budget as one of them. Budget for implementation. I think that's going to be probably a challenge for everyone. We've also got logistical challenges as well, being so remote. Just trying to get things to the island via our shipping capabilities. I've put electric vehicles on there as well because it was one of the options. It's something we're going to be facing soon as part of the UK. Is that it will only be electric vehicles available eventually to move across to the island, but we don't have the infrastructure to support that.
Infrastructure, yeah. Oh.
So
So
that's
could I can also add the infrastructure that goes with that, yeah, because that's also with the charging stations. And is that
Yeah.
okay?
Yeah, that's perfect.
All right, great.
Yeah, and I guess I think Khushbu's added people cannot invest in solutions themselves. So we're largely a military island working community with no right to abode. So we need the organizations on the island to work together and agree on a one island solution for the rest of us that are living here. Don't know if you want to add anything there, Khushbu.
No, but I think that sort of is described by what we have here. But indeed, yeah, there is still, even if you have centralized solutions, there is still options. Well, maybe currently not regulatory, yeah, but there is still options that can be done so that people have, let's say, share in the eventual installations, yeah. But
Yeah.
I assume there is no regulation currently for that, yeah.
As far as I'm aware, this
Yeah.
is all very new to me, so learning through this course.
All right, great. Well, it's great to have you here with us. Thank you for the input. If it's okay with you, we go to Bermuda.
Yeah.
All right. All right, Bermuda. Do we have any representatives with us here? So I'll move on to Bonaire, and then if somebody's here from Bermuda, please speak up. Yeah. Bonaire, do we have any representatives from Bonaire?
I might be able to add some challenges for Bonaire, though.
All right.
Definitely, the training of the people is an issue.
All right, so we have it somewhere already.
And the infrastructure is a big issue.
You already put in, okay, never mind. I was gonna put like that, but okay.
I didn't, so I don't know who did, but
No,
yeah.
it's okay. Somebody, they're
Okay.
not necessarily connected. All right, good.
Okay.
Infrastructure, grid infrastructure, yeah, that's indeed the problem, yeah.
I don't think, but I mean, budget is less of an issue because they have the dependency with the Netherlands, but those two from my visits to the island are very obvious constraints. Yeah.
All right, then we move on to British Virgin Islands. Do we have any representatives here?
Hi. Yes, Ms. Trott is here. So our constraints would be the financial constraints, of course. I think you have it listed as the budget for implementation. Our infrastructure also needs to be addressed so that we can also have facilities for electric vehicles, charging stations and the like, and also some policy amendments.
So infrastructure mainly for electric vehicles, you mean?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. For charging purposes.
Yeah.
By Jay, you said policy for?
Amending some of the policies for renewable energy
Yeah.
considerations.
Yeah. Lucia, I don't know whether you're the host again, but I can't. I am Lucia. No, that's fine. Can't answer because I can't see anyone coming in anymore.
I would say amending, right? Because there is already
Yes,
some
amending.
policy,
There
yeah.
is policy,
Yeah.
and they just needs to be amended.
All right, good. Thank you. We keep it at that.
You're
And do you know the current share of renewables? Maybe?
Sorry, repeat the question?
Yeah, we have found that the goal for the share of renewables is 30% until 2030. But the current share of renewables, do you happen to know what is it right now?
20%.
20%. Okay,
Mhm.
great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Maybe Papa. Okay, that's not. Quentin, can you please add that, or Len, for British Virgin Islands for the current chair? All right. I see Aruba is very busy adding challenges. Okay, that's good to see. Cayman Islands, do we have anybody with us here today? Okay. I'm gonna assume that's a no, as we don't hear from anyone. Okay. If somebody from Cayman Islands still wants to let us know, please feel free to do that later on. Curaçao, I'm sure we have somebody from Curaçao. No?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Yes. Hello.
Hi.
I'm Nathalie Petronella from the Ministry of Economic Development. Let me check. Maybe the goals we should
Change?
yes, we should change. Currently, the penetration of green energy is about 30%,
Okay.
and of the production mix. And with the intended expansion of an onshore wind farm, brings Curaçao to a total of 68 megawatt of wind energy. And this will be an average penetration of about 48% by 2024.
Okay.
Okay.
So currently already at 30, and then
Soon 48.
By
48.
2024, it will be about 50%.
Okay.
48.9%.
Oh, 50 then.
And Natalie,
50.
did you then adjust the goals for 2035 and 2040?
We are currently in the process of revising our policy. So we didn't, let's say, determine yet the new targets, but by 2026, it will be about the intentions are to reach about 17%, sorry, 70%.
70.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, correct.
I also cannot correct that for some reason, Quentin. So if you can correct it, that would be great. All right. Then what would you say are the key challenges?
The key challenges is, yes, the same, almost the same as other countries.
Okay.
For example, financing,
Okay.
budgetary constraints,
Okay.
infrastructural knowledge.
Infrastructure, I see I have some more here. Okay. Infrastructure, grid infrastructure, of course, as you're getting relatively high in the percentage of renewables. Does that also include smart meters, or is it something that's already implemented?
We already implemented, for example, smart meters.
Okay.
But we still have to finish with that project.
Okay. So budgetary, infrastructure,
And knowledge.
And knowledge, yes.
Okay. And human capacity, that's mainly at the public level, you mean, or
Technical.
Yes, on the public level.
Yeah.
Because on the private level, we do have some, let's say, private companies.
Either way, doesn't matter. To say, okay, you know, whatever, but
Okay, so we need to mute
let me
someone.
see. Yes.
Yeah, I think we're fine. Yeah.
That should be fine.
So on the public level,
more on the public, yes,
Yeah.
more on the public level.
Yeah. Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Then we go to the Falkland Islands. Do we have anybody here with us?
Hi.
Hello.
Good afternoon. This is Stacey Prager from the Falkland Islands Development Corporation.
Hello, how are you? All right,
Yeah,
let
good,
us,
thank you. Yeah, so
do we have the correct
yeah, I should
current status and the goals, and where do you want to start?
I should say that I don't represent the government and I'm not directly involved in any issues, but I think for renewable energy for the capital Stanley, the figure you have there is correct. Whereas if you go out into the countryside and the farms, the vast majority of them use renewable energy as their energy source. But I don't have the exact figures to hand.
Okay, that's okay.
I'd
But
say
you're aware, even
on
though
the
you're not part of the government, you're aware of the challenges currently being faced on the islands, no?
Yeah, I'd say that the main two challenges moving to renewable energy are the fact of, again, the budget for implementation. There's a lot of competing demands for funding from other capital projects, infrastructure projects. So I'd say, demand for funding, and also the existing grid infrastructure, which would need overhauling in order to be able to accommodate more renewable energy. So yeah, I'd say budget for implementation and existing grid infrastructure.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And then thank you. We can move on, right?
Montserrat.
Right. Then Montserrat, do we have anybody with us here? Saba, I see you already filled out some of the challenges. Who's with us today?
Yes, my name is Courtney Hassel. I'm a policy advisor for economic affairs at Public Entity SEBA, and I have energy in my portfolio. So I will be speaking mainly on the perspective from the government. We at the moment have approximately between 36 to 40% renewable energy. Our goal with the third phase of our renewable energy project is to arrive at 89% renewable energy. And then with the acceptance of the SEBA as one of the islands participating in the Clean Energy Islands program, we aim to arrive at 100% by 2030. So our main challenges at the moment is land ownership. That has been a big one to resolve this year so that we can start the implementation of the project. A lot of the land on SEBA is not government owned. It's technically privately owned land, but it is unregistered land due to historical situations with no access to notarial services, things like this. So that's been a large challenge that we are almost overcome at the moment. And then although we do get heavily subsidized for this project from the Dutch ministry as well as the European Union. Yes?
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Although we do get subsidized from the ministries in the Netherlands as well as the European Union for our transition in sustainable energy, we do still have a gap in our budget in order to entirely complete the project. So that's something that is a challenge for us that will be working to resolve and to lobby for additional funding. And then, I'm taking untrained staff, but really one of the topics that we will be looking at with the Clean Energy Islands is capacity building. So training that covers, the needed skills for operation of dynamic renewable energy grid systems. So I'd say those are, well, land ownership, of course, and budget for implementation are two of the bigger ones that we need to, that we're working to overcome. And then, it just included the training of staff.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you put in here for maintenance, because indeed, in a lot of cases, there is new project, there is an investor, a project that comes in to implement specific new technology, but then indeed for maintenance, there needs to be staff on the island that is aware and knows how to do this. Yeah. All right. Thank you. Thank you. Can we move on to St. Helena? Do we have anybody with us here today?
Good afternoon. I'm Janet Lawrence from Connect St. Helena Limited. With me is Jeff Augustus, who's our technical manager for electricity. So you've got our present situation just about correct. Our goal is to reach 80% electricity generation from renewables by 2027-28. In terms of challenges, budget, of course. We've also put down probably, if we were prioritizing, lack of regulation in the utility sector as our second one. And our third one that I haven't heard for this afternoon yet, is our low and still declining demand. So we have an issue in that the more that we invest in the sector, we don't have to think about just the upfront capital costs, but about our ability to operate and maintain it. And with a declining customer base, that's proving more and more challenging to actually be able to sustain the infrastructure in the longer term.
And the declining customer base is because they consume less or because people leave the island?
A combination of things. So one is that we're finally getting to grips with the modern world. So it is about changing patterns of consumption. Yes, we've got a declining resident population. We've also had a situation where in the lead up to the island trying to find cheaper ways to obtain electricity, there's been a great deal of private investment in private PV systems. So we operate a grid for the island, and of course, given our very, very small scale, this is something where it benefits those few consumers rather than benefiting the island as a whole, and it is causing massive disruption to our grid as well. So it's a combination of factors and a number of challenges that come out from that declining demand base.
Yep.
Thank you. We have a few more. Maybe we have somebody from St. Eustatius here with us.
If not, again, Lucia, I can tell you a bit of the challenges of St. Eustatius. Yes. And then if other people from the island come, they can correct me. And if that's wrong, then I'm sorry. But no, it's a volcanic island. And so the challenge is that it is very expensive to put certain technology there because it has to resist to earthquakes and volcanic lands. And that's makes the budget for implementation super challenging. And then it's a super tiny island. So like Sabah, the untrained staff for maintenance and stuff like that is super challenging. So I think for me, if you would ask me, those would be the two that I would put forward. Yeah.
Right. Well, if we get them joining and
then I might have a bad score. I hope I did a good job though.
All right. We have for Saint Martin here. I see many challenges. Who's with us here today?
Good afternoon, Shervin Frederick.
Hello.
Hello. I'll start with the now. Currently, we don't have, I would say that would be at zero.
Okay.
We don't have anything I would term renewable on the island.
Yeah.
At the moment, the goal was always what you had there, what you have, that 85% was the goal based on our projections and our planning. But they have encountered some delays, so I would adjust that to 30% by 2030, I would say.
Yeah.
To 30%, and our challenges are indeed what I indicated or what we indicated, because there are more colleagues on this in this session. Budget for implementation, I would say political clarity on exactly what and how we will get it done. Then training and infrastructure, definitely. We have some studies ongoing in terms of IRP. So the what you would call integrated resource plan. Our electrical company is currently conducting or has one of those out on a tender. Land availability and that type of that is still up in the air as to space for renewables. And what else do I have?
And is that mainly from the environmental point of view, or?
Well, there's still some discussions in terms of you have private land, you have government land. So the assessment on how much government land is available to be able to meet our projections versus what is private and if we would have to work with the private entities, et cetera, et cetera. We've also looked at our water basis, so ponds, the ocean, et cetera, to see if those would be options that we would be able to place renewables in or on in the ocean. So we've been doing a good amount of assessment, but in terms of actually getting it off the ground to say we have something tangible, that is still ongoing.
Okay. And maybe just an explanation for the one that says support. What do we
Well,
mean
so
by this?
support was is in a general, because we do have support from, I think I would say, the Netherlands, but that is still being worked out. And in terms, we have, I would say, our executive branch. I think that's some support would be needed there, and that fits into the clarity that would be we would require, as well as to how or where, what is possible, what we really want to do.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. And thank you for very detailed and specific comments. That's really good. And we're glad that you're here with few people. So we'll also hear from you later on as well. And then the last one today, Turks and Caicos Island.
I think we have Eric here.
Yes, I'm here. I tried to copy and
That's
paste
okay.
what
That's
I
all right.
developed.
We'll do it.
I wrote in my Word, but I don't know. It doesn't work. So allow me to just read what I wrote while we started this one. The good thing with Turks and Caicos is we have political will to transition to green energy. We have a cabinet decision and they support transition. Currently, the RE penetration is about 5 to 6%. About 3% from the public utility, and the rest are individuals who put up their solar panels on top of the roof or in the ground mount. The target is correct, 33% by 2040. Challenges. We are currently preparing the legislation, the policy regulatory framework for RE and EE penetration. It passed through the first reading in the parliament, and I believe the second reading will be tomorrow. So we are hoping that it will pass the second reading so that the renewable energy bill will be approved. And once that bill will be approved, it will be easier for individuals, hotels, etc., to put the solar PVs or whatever in their rooftop or in their properties. One challenge is the current license of the public supplier. They have the exclusive license to provide electricity until 2037. So there will be a legal battle once we open the RE, then they will challenge the government. We have the license to give exclusive energy to the island. So our legal team are reviewing how to handle that. We have also challenge of infrastructure towards green energy, because we have several proposals to develop a microgrid, and while developing the microgrid, we will be modifying how it is set up. It will be elevated, the solar PVs, and it will be spaced a little bit wider so that we can plant agricultural crops in between, and we call that agrivoltaics. So, and we know Turks and Caicos has a limited land.
Lucia, the policy and regulation is not so much a challenge there, because the political will is there and the first reading has gone through. So I would remove that from the challenge.
Then you still, even if
I have it in my
regulation,
notes.
No?
Yeah, you might still need regulation. Yeah.
Because that is in
yes. I can expound the policy and regulation. It will go through the second reading hopefully tomorrow, but I believe the public supplier, the company using fossil fuel, will challenge the bill. So it will be a challenge. I consider a challenge because of course their revenue will be affected.
All right, so we keep the policy there, even though it's
I have it in the notes. Yeah. Okay.
Right.
Super.
All right, thank you. Is there anything else that you wanted to add in there?
Yes, for future plans, By the way, for the policy, I want to acknowledge EU RESMBID because we have a project supported by EU RESMBID, and there's a policy component, and the output of the consultants is fed into the RE and the EE bill, like a lot of things, the regulation forms, etc., interconnection agreement, PPA, are outputs of the consultancy under the RESMBID project. And for future plans, we are lucky also to have received a grant from EU GO for a small feasibility study on offshore wind using available data. And 2 weeks ago, I was in a conference in Jamaica, and we have a chance to meet some senior officials of the Caribbean Development Bank, and they want to support the offshore wind further by lending some of their equipment, the LiDAR, to measure inaccurate data, because they said they want inaccurate data so that it will be bankable, and they want to support it in case it is feasible. Of course, it will depend on the result of the feasibility study supported by EU GO, and then we will go further. And in addition to that, if the result of the feasibility study is good, they want to add green hydrogen, because there will be a lot of power to be produced by offshore wind, and we don't want to kill the public utility. So we of course need to conduct infusion study to just provide what the public supplier cannot provide. And they also are willing to support the electrification of the public transport, like electric bus. So there will be
a question.
infrastructure.
Maybe a question, Eric, if we wanted to put that into challenges. So we have the policy and regulation, and we have the license for the public supplier,
Yes.
the infrastructure, meaning the grid, where we
Yes.
also have for agri-PV. But then would you say for the other challenges to be accurate weather data or storage needs? How would you frame
Yes,
that?
yes, we consider that as a challenge because storage is very important. That's the reason why we want to combine solar PV and wind, offshore wind, because at night there is still wind, but we still need to store the data. Another issue in Turks and Caicos is the hurricane, because all this infrastructure will be flattened. I was a witness of a category 5 hurricane, and it really, just like a pencil, took the electric pole. The hurricane category 5, when you are in the direct hit, it's really very destructive.
So I have added as a maybe final challenge extreme weather conditions.
Yes, yes.
All right. And I'm sure other some of the other islands are probably facing that as well, but we didn't put it there. All right. Okay. Can we frame those as the key challenges?
No.
Yeah. All right. Then we are missing a few of the islands, but I think we already have enough information for here. This was our sort of introduction also of the participants, and I hope this gave you a bit more understanding of what are the challenges and the, let's say, positions that other participants in the workshop have on the energy transition. And now I would give a word. We're a bit late on the agenda, but I think
I'll speed up.
I'll give word to Len. So Len,
Lucia, can you share my slides?
I can try to do that.
Yeah, and you can immediately go to the second one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you to policy cycles, because it's a bit let's say an theoretical concept. However, you will see that it is it's a very natural thing. So it has been designed based on observations of how policy is made, how it evolves. And it's a cycle. However, it's continuous. So it's not because you develop a policy, you go through the cycle, it's done. So afterwards, after Shakil's presentation, we will dive also into some examples of different islands that take you along in what these policy cycles are. And from what we just did, you already see that some of you are really facing challenges with, still defining the policy. So that's the earlier state in the policy cycle. We're not seeing it in presentation mode. While others are already, like Eric just said, are already on that policy cycle. They have on that policy definition. They're defined what it is, and they're now going to face the challenges related to implementation, which could be indeed that company that has the unique right to exploit and produce the electricity. Lucia, we see it not in presentation mode.
Okay. Because it is.
No, well, we don't.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
there we go. Should you do you see it now?
No.
No?
No.
I'm doing the only thing I can, which is swap. So do you see it now?
We see it in normal mode, but it's okay. That's fine. You can take me to
Just
the
the
third.
normal mode.
Yeah, you can take me to the third slide.
Wait. Here we go. All right. Now do you see it?
We see you, but it might take a second. I see you.
Stop presenters. I'm trying to do it, but it's not working for some reason.
So while Lucia is doing it, a policy cycle typically has 5 parts. And the first thing is where you set your ambitions. So a lot of you have already done that with clearly saying, this is what we want to achieve by a certain timing. And then a few of you have already identified literally the policy formulation. So this is the step where you're literally going to formulate what the policy is. So you can take me to the third slide where I am. Yeah. There we go.
Now you see the presentation or presenters mode?
We see presenters mode.
All right, now you should see the presentation.
Yeah, that's fine, perfectly fine. So yeah, so these are the 5 cycles. So they literally come from research that was done by some people in the US that looked really at how do we make policy independent of the topic of what it was about. These were the 5 things that came along each time. And as you see, it's a cycle, so it ends with a policy evaluation, which immediately can feed into the next policy cycle. That is not always necessary. Sometimes you can go out and say it's a termination there, we're done, the problem is solved. Yeah, you can give me indeed the next slide. So if we look at the agenda settings, this is typically based on observations. You see a challenge which could be inspired by another island setting a certain goal, or by the fact that climate change really affects you and you feel the need to do something, or another reason. So it's an observation, it could be bottom up, it could come from someone with a great idea, it could be an investor coming up with a great opportunity, and that is what you're going to do. And then this could also be linked to upcoming challenges. So we had one of the islands saying, okay, we are losing people, people are leaving the islands. There are islands where, you know, there are more people that are older than they're younger, that bring specific challenges. So the pandemic has enforced that. So these could be your reasons to set an agenda. You haven't defined yet what you're going to do. So Lucia, I can have the next one. So what you're going to do now is formulate what you're going to, the problem is that you're going to address. And we did yesterday the exercise with the problem trees and the objectives trees. So you actually focus on, first of all, what is it really that we need to address? What goals do we need to achieve? And then you look at which possible approaches and measures you will take to try to understand what exactly the exact impact is of what you want to do, which could be, you could say 80% renewables, but actually your impact is that you don't want to burn fossil fuels anymore because it helps, I mean, it's bad for climate change and it's bad for pollution. So that is your expected impact. And then what has been said before here, getting the people along, and making sure that people react the way you do, that is all part of the positive formulation. So it is like Eric at the stage you're literally in now, where you already anticipate that one of the stakeholders is going to go against you. At the third cycle, Lucia, is where you do the decision making. So actually, Eric is, oh yeah, there's an example in here. Actually, you're going faster than I was going. But it's okay. So this is a bit of what we did yesterday. If there's a high price for electricity, there's an increased risk for poverty, there is oil-dependent electricity generation, but there might be a high bureaucracy to get your renewables connected. Insufficient investment that was mentioned a couple of times, but also people might have currently limited possibility because of the price, but maybe also because of interrupted supply for having adequate comfort, which could lead to poor performance in school. If they can't sleep because it's too hot or it's too humid, that could be an issue. And then if you go to the next one, we will see how we typically organize it. That's what we did yesterday. Yeah? And then we could turn that into a positive tree, and from there formulate the steps that we're going to take. So that brings us to the next one, which is that policy formulation. That literally is the goals we want to achieve, the impact. So that's more that the detailing really of the agenda setting and closing this part. Can I have the next one? And then we go to the decision making, which again, Erika is literally in it. So this is, we have an appropriate level of the government, and the policy can be adapted. So at the end of this, we have a policy that we can start implementing, which brings us to the next step. But first of all, what is the implementation step that is moving from the policy to the action? And that means now you've decided that it's going to be so much renewables, and now you have to get there. And that is where we see a lot of challenges. It's already a challenge to get accepted that you're going to achieve a certain goal, but then to implement it and to get everyone going, to decide who's going to be in charge, because as some of you mentioned, there's no regulator yet. You might need a regulator because all of a sudden things become more complex. And so you now have to decide who's going to be in charge of what. Then you have to decide which campaigns you might need to launch, which could be information campaigns, which could be, support campaigns, financial support, technical support, and then, which is mentioned already, I think it was one of the Dutch islands, Aruba, I think, where you mentioned that it's really difficult to understand what we need to monitor, and we don't have access to the right data. That's a super important thing, which brings indeed to the evaluation. In order to know what you're doing and whether it's efficient or effective, you come into that next cycle. And in an ideal way, in an ideal world, the type of parameters you're going to evaluate and the frequency with which you evaluate them, you already have them defined in the earlier steps, especially in the preparation of the implementation, so that you know that you're going to have access to the data and you don't have to struggle with trying to assess really whether you're effective or not. This will help us as well for resistance. But it helps us also to readjust. Sometimes you made a policy and it's not as effective as you wanted, so you might need to make changes. Or sometimes you see it's super effective and you reach your goals and there is no need to continue, for example, support. And that's when it would lead to termination. When it doesn't lead to termination, it's typically where you readjust and then you do the cycle again with what you want to do. So I know that all of you are familiar with how you make policy. This is just a way of organizing the steps and knowing a bit where you are. And that will help us also to see if we see people that have challenges with the implementation step and we see others that have already gone through it, it's really important that you can exchange, because you saw that a lot of the challenges that we put on the table are very similar, and some will be addressed throughout this course, throughout all the courses that GoETC is offering. But there's going to be a lot of skills of things like the skills of the people installing it and implementing it that might require to collaborate among you and to see how you can address it. So that's also why it is important to be able to understand in which part you are, so that you can exchange with peers that might be a bit more advanced in a certain element. So that is policy cycles. And so it is not by definition linear or circular. It can be anything else. I mean, we'll go through a few examples afterwards. It is the phases, but whether the phases terminate or not, that will depend a bit on how effective your legislation was, which doesn't define whether you made a bad policy or not, but it sometimes depends on, circumstances, reaction of the audience, reaction of potential investors, challenges with getting infrastructure like the Connect St. Helena. People say, it's all fine to have that, but I mean, that completely changes how we do the business model. And that changes also how you set the prices. And you might impact the most vulnerable people who won't be able to put PV on the roof. if you don't think about it nicely. So that is what we will dive into in the next sessions as well, and especially that price setting comes back in regulation. But we will get to some examples on these cycles throughout today. So that's a bit on the theory. And then, Lucia, I'm giving the floor back to you. You're muted.
Sorry, I was complaining about closing the PowerPoints and sharing and not sharing. Good thing you didn't hear that, so that's good. All right, then we go back to the our Miro board briefly before we go to Shakil, because what we wanted to see here is basically, let me share the screen again, sort of come back to you guys, as Len also referred to some of you on the specific policy cycle phase, yeah, where we were. But looking into here, what we try to do also is look at the policy cycles and see in which part you see yourself. So looking into what Len just presented, have you recognized yourself in any of these, let's say, policy cycles? I mean, we definitely, because Eric went into the details on the Turks and Caicos for the energy policy for renewables and energy efficiency, then we know that they're definitely the decision-making process. So it's sort of the policy is being prepared. It still needs to be adopted to then be implemented, yeah. But maybe some of you, we want to say where you see yourself, or to join us in how you understood sort of what Len was just presenting.
Oh, we have a lot of people on the board now. Yeah,
that's good.
Yeah, definitely.
Nobody really wants to react to that. Maybe I can just briefly go through based on what you already told us. So,
Yeah.
for example, indeed in Saint Martin, as you were discussing, yeah, there is a bit of lack of political clarity. So that also means that you're still at agenda setting phase. That's how I see it. I don't know if that's how you see it, yeah. Considering all the challenges where you are right now and where you're going. But I hope, because you guys are not reacting, I hope that means that Len's presentation was relatively clear, and maybe right now you don't want to go into the discussion, but it's definitely something to sort of think about later on and reflect and see how the specific characteristics that Len mentioned align with what is your current situation. As I see, Len is putting some of the post-its here, but you're also welcome to add while we are hearing the presentations and while we're in the workshop. All right, then I think anyway, because we took a bit longer at the beginning,
yeah,
we're on time to let Shakil present his example. So we have with us Shakil Bedassi. And as I mentioned earlier, he's from climate finance. He's a climate finance consultant at the African Development Bank, and he'll be talking to us about energy policy design on the islands, using the energy transition to tackle multiple benefits and increase acceptance in Mauritius. Hi, Shakil. I know you will be sharing your slides, so maybe you also want to introduce yourself briefly, and then start with the presentation.
Okay, so please just my screen.
Wait, Shakil, we can't hear you. Wait, can you try it?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, if you talk directly on a microphone, you're fine. Yeah.
All right. Is it clear?
Yeah, it's clear. And we see the
Okay.
presentation. You're better in this than I am, apparently.
Okay.
All right, go ahead.
Okay, well, the test run helped a bit earlier. So good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Shakil Bedassi. Pleasure to be with you this afternoon. And very warm welcome to all my fellow islanders. Big hi from the other side of the world. It's actually 10 p.m. at my place, but I'm very happy to be with you and having this exchange experience with your So just before we dive in, a quick overview of the presentation itself and what I plan to share with you. I am a Mauritian citizen. And by trade, I'm an electrical engineer and also have a master's in engineering management. I have experience in working in utilities both in Mauritius and in Australia for a few years. And since 2010, I've been working in the development world through stints with the United Nations Development Programme and the African Development Bank. So my expertise is mostly towards designing and implementing projects aimed at low carbon development. So climate change mitigation with renewable energy and also a bit of low carbon transport. And I'm currently working with the African Development Bank to help them mobilize resources for African countries for mitigation projects. My email is here if any one of you want to contact me. So the way I've set up this presentation is to go a bit of an overview of the country profile. I've seen from the different islands on the mirror board that some are similar to Mauritius, but I think each country, particularly for islands, have their own specificity. So I believe it would be good to have an overview of an understanding of the island and the economic indicators and so on and so forth. And before we dive into the nitty-gritty, the trends in renewable, the energy sector itself, how is it structured, what are the trends in renewable energy generation, the policy context, and then from where it was to where it evolved, where it came, and finally, just close this. Sorry. And then just to give a bit of an overview of what has been the community acceptance of renewable energy and the challenges and lessons that we have learned. So, okay, so Mauritius is located in the Indian Ocean. It's on the eastern part of the continent, off the coast of Madagascar. It's a small island, but I gather that it's probably bigger than most of them, probably besides Falkland. So it's a 2,400 kilometers square. And I think it's definitely the more populous than any of the islands present today of the representative. So we have 1.2 million inhabitants, of which 40% live in urban areas. We've been independent since 1968. We don't have any natural resources, petrol or minerals. And in terms of governance, we are a democratic country with a Westminster style of government, being a former British colony. In terms of governance, we consistently rank first in the Mo Ibrahim Index for governance in Africa. And Mauritius is also known for being a place where it's easy to do business. So we're currently ranked 13th on the east to do business as per the World Bank. So Mauritius has a more or less good economy, stable economy. Probably the poverty is quite low. And in terms of GDP, the GDP per capita is around 10,000 USD as per 2022. Unemployment rate 7%, inflation 11%. And it's noteworthy to know that as for our GDP, services and industry account for around 86%. This is a key information because 86% of our economy depends on having a reliable but also an affordable electricity supply. So, and in terms of access to electricity, most of the population is connected, if not all. The 0.4 are basically people who want to be off-grid. The domestic tariff is around 10 cents per kilowatt hour. This is an average. There are tariffs for different commercial and industrial, but on average, the domestic tariff is around 10 cents. And in terms of land coverage, 20% of the whole territory is considered as a forested area. So going now into the energy sector, the profile of it. So you can see the plotted here is the peak demand from 2010 to 2022. And it has risen constantly from a bit less than 400 to around 500 megawatts. So, and the share of renewable energy in that mix is around 21%. So that as at 2022, sorry. So again, we have, in terms of total energy consumed, we have about 2,690 gigawatt hour. And of that percent, and in terms of renewables, bagasse is our biggest input. For those who don't know, bagasse is the byproduct of sugarcane. Initially, the Mauritian economy used to be very reliant on sugar production, and bagasse is basically what is left of when the sugar is crushed, and the fibrous material that remains is dried and then is used in the furnace. So this is considered as a renewable energy. We have hydropower, solar PV, which accounts for 10%, and then some landfill gas and a bit of wind. But the bulk of our electricity generations come from fuel oil, coal, and jet fuel. So 80% from non-renewable and 20% from renewables. So that's in 2022. A bit of a trip back in time to 2009. So back then, again, the energy mix was, the share of renewable energy was again around 21%. But here you would see that the bagasse accounted for 16%, while now accounts only for around 8%. And this is critical to note. So even though from 2009 to 2022, the share of renewable energy has been more or less the same, there has been some changes in the overall landscape. And let me show you how. So the top line is the cumulative energy generated from renewable resources from 2010 to 2022. Bagasse used to be the top the biggest share of renewable energy. So and this has declined gradually over the years, while renewable energy from solar PV and landfill has been more or less stable, and some wind has been keeping the total more or less the same. And this is very important in terms when we go to policy. I'll explain why. So hydroelectricity in Mauritius is a seasonal input to our, depending on whether there's rainy season or not, or there's a drought. And the potential is nearly fully tapped, meaning that our topography makes it that we can't have any major infrastructure work to have a dam and have electricity power. So we can only accommodate some few micro hydros, but this, I mean, even in the long term, it won't only bring a couple of megawatts. For landfill gas, it's also operating at a near maximum capacity, but now with an increased focus on recycling and circular economy, and also we have the population is a bit reducing, so this has been more or less stable and won't be contributing much. Photovoltaic is the one that has seen highest growth since the mid-2010s, and wind projects also has some potential, but the projects have been facing many delays for various reasons, procurement, and so on and so forth, acquisition of land. So this has stalled us in terms of progress in terms of renewable energy intake. And bagasse, as you might have guessed, because our economy has shifted from an agricultural economy to a more service-based, there has been more competition for land to convert into other uses. So meaning that there's less and less sugarcane being harvested every year, so there's less and less bagasse available. So basically, what we're having to do is also, besides transitioning from fossil fuels to renewable energy, we also have to deal with a decrease in our most important contributor in terms of renewable energy. So before I dive into the policy context, what are the different policies? Let me just give you an overview of the institutional setup. All policy matters in Mauritius is decided by the Ministry of Energy and Public Utilities. So they are the one who ensure that the strategies in the energy sector are conducive to meet the national goals. We have one utility, the only utility, the Central Electricity Board. It does generation, transmission, distribution, and sale of electricity. It is a parastatal body under the aegis of the Ministry of Energy, and it supplies around 40 to 45% of the energy requirements, depending on availability of bagasse, or whether it has been a rainy season, and so on and so forth. So only a few years back, there was only the Ministry of Energy and the Central Electricity Board who were pretty much being judge and party. So meaning that all the tariff was proposed by the CB and then approved by the ministry. There was no regulator, and this has as you will see, it has been a bit of a constraint. So And very just recently, we have a couple of new players on the market. We have the Mauritius Renewable Energy Agency. It is also a parastatal body under the aegis of the Ministry of Energy, and it was set up in 2016. So its main mandate is to promote renewable energy and create an environment to the development of renewable energy. So they do provide policy advice and guidance to the ministry, and they do a lot of research work also on top of doing awareness. And we also have the Utility Regulatory Authority, which is the national regulatory body. And this was established in 2016. So it's a bit of a paradox in the sense that we had nearly the whole island connected to electricity. We have a good modern infrastructure, but there hasn't been any regulator. But this has, in a way, been a bit of a stumbling block for the penetration of energy in the grid. And I'll explain to you how. So in terms of how the policy design went on from 2009 up to now, I've listed the main points, and I've done it in a bit of chronological order, so that I thought it would make more sense, and hopefully you'll be identified some aspect which is probably similar to in your country. So and I put this point again here that our regulatory act was adopted in 2004, but it was only set up in 2016, and this is mostly because the utility is the place where you have the bulk of the capacity of the human capacity. So and there's a bit of a tribal mentality in the sense that there's a feeling that if there would be a regulator, they will lose their monopoly, and they won't have the whole playing field for themselves. So although it was not, I mean, plain sight, we all know here that between the curtains, there has been a bit of a political back end clashes to not to have the regulatory authority empowered a bit earlier. So, I mean, this is something that probably would be resonate with some of you. And then going into the policy formation itself. So it basically started in 2009, where the government developed the long-term energy strategy. So this was more of a setting the goal kind of initiative, as Lynn explained a bit earlier. So there, it just indicated that we need to achieve 35% by 2025, listed the renewable technology we should be focusing, and provided, I would say, an educated guess on which technology should be providing what percentage. And this long-term energy strategy also requested the establishment of the Renewable Energy Agency, which came into fruition nearly 8-9 years afterwards. So, and one of the main milestone that was achieved back in 2009 is that the government developed a grid code for small-scale distributed generation. So, for grid code is basically a protocol that establishes the technical parameters that needs to be respected in order to have a connection onto the low voltage grid. So it's and contains all the health, all the technical information, all the health and safety, and the procedures of how to do the connection. So this allows people to have connection up to 50 megawatts to the network, and it was developed with the support of UNDP and the Global Environment Facility. So when the government developed that, they also proposed that very attractive feed-in tariffs. So a call for proposal was launched for 2 megawatts in 2010, and it was a resounding success. In less than 1 week, there was applications for more than 2 megawatts, and 2 megawatts meaning approximately 237 households were connected, and there was more and more. There was quite a bit of requests more, so much that the government had to allow for an additional 1 megawatt to be allowed on the grid. So building on this, the government received funding from the GEF again for a full-scale project to work a bit on the soft side, and so to develop market-oriented regulatory framework to promote renewable energy. So that's mostly for photovoltaic. To develop capacity of government, financial institutions, and private sector to evaluate the economic and financial viability of renewable energy projects. Although it was a buzzword and there was an agreement that there should be more and more renewable energy, there was a lack of capacity at all levels, even in the financial institutions, to understand how to evaluate a renewable energy project, and even at the government side to understand the full nitty-gritty of it. So this is the requested support from the GEF. One of the aspects also which was also critical was to update the solar maps. So have to have high resolution solar maps, not only for the main island but also for the outer islands. And also a significant portion of money was requested to support the feeding scheme, meaning that part of the financial support from the GEF was used to pay the price differentials in the feeding tariff. And so this was more the first phase, and it was of the small-scale distributed scheme, and it was quite a success. However, it was not really possible to maintain the same level of feeding tariff, which back 12 years ago was around 40 cents per kilowatt hour for 20 years. So there was a very heavy outlay of money, but that was just done, and that's why they kept only 2 megawatts, because they wanted to create the buzz, and it worked. So and under that same project, under the same support, the government was able to achieve the following. They did a very thorough technical study to assess what is the grid absorption capacity, meaning that they wanted to know how much more intermittent renewable energy can the national grid accept without while still being stable. And also we've developed a grid code for medium scale generation. For medium scale generation, the reason they've done that because there was a very high demand from industries, hotels to be able to connect to the grid, and they were proposing installations of more than 50 kilowatts. And also through the GEF support, they were able to have training of government, the private institution, private sector, and also the financial institution. So from there on, we had a new phase of the SSD scheme, which was launched in 2015. But this one, it had a net metering modality. Net metering in the sense that you were only the amount of electricity that was fed back to the grid was waived off of the amount that you consumed. So basically, at the end of the month, whatever is remaining, you pay for that. And if you have accumulated a certain credit in terms you have exported more than you have imported from the grid, after a certain period of time, the utility would give back, would return this back. And this also was quite successful. And in the period of 3 years, there was 9 megawatts installed. The intake was definitely slower than for the first one, where there was a high feeding tariff, but nonetheless, it was still substantive and in line with what the government expected. So building on that, the government wanted to scale up those because it was also creating a new economic sector in terms of PV installers, technicians, and so on and so forth. But they were also wary that the grid has a limited capacity to absorb so much intermittent renewable energy. And it was also agreed that there was a strong government push to make sure that the regulator is established. So that's in 2016. So so coming back to the grid absorption capacity study, that study showed that if there was, by adding some 18 megawatts of battery storage system and also implementing automatic generator control on the heavy fuel engines, there is a possibility of accepting 125 megawatts of intermittent renewable energy with the grid still being stable. So based on these findings, the government requested support from the GCF in 2017, and they received 20 million grants for strengthening the marine and the URA, which have been just recently established, to improve the grid absorption capacity through investment on the battery storage and the automatic generator control, and also for installing mini grids on the outer islands. And in 2019, the government launched an updated roadmap 2030 for the electric sector. And here, the renewable energy targets were revised up to 35% by 2025. And this was with some very specific targets for different renewable energy technologies. So that's an extract from the roadmap, saying that by 2025, watch technology what should be the installed capacity, and how much should it be contributing in terms of energy generation and the overall mix. And this roadmap has been supported by some thorough technical studies. And it is it was used to also incite private sector to come and invest in the country. So a bit further down the line, in 2021, the government upped the ante furthermore in the updated national determined contributions, and they have now set the target to have 60% of the energy needs by 2030, and also to phase out coal completely by 2030, and to increase energy efficiency by 10% from the 2019 baseline. So, in summary, if from what I have narrated for the last few minutes, so in terms of the summary of the energy targets, in terms of timeline, it was initially 25% by 2025, then it came up to 35% by 2025, and then by 60% to 2030. While currently we are still at 21%. So, and we have only 7 years to go to meet the 60%. So there's still lots of ground to cover. But in terms of having the backbone, I personally think that in terms of the institutional strengthening, the development of the electrical grid, there has been the backbone has been set to build on that. And this leads us to where we are now. So our regulator and the Renewable Energy Agency are operational, still a bit understaffed, but the personnel is getting trained on a constant basis. In terms of policy, the Electricity Act and the CEB Act were amended in order to have more power towards the regulator, to give the enforcement power to the regulator. There were grid codes developed for generations and also for transmission. And so that this is to ensure that once there is licensing in place, they will be supported by those grid codes. We have developed regulations on standard for renewable energy technologies to ensure that promoters bringing in solar panels or bringing in panels which are according to the standards that is required. And they all have tools now that would fully support the institutions. Notably, there's a project evaluation tool for renewable energy and also a tariff methodology tool that is helping the regulator to assess what are the tariffs being proposed and clear them for approval and recommend them for approval or not to the government. So, in parallel, there has been the batteries have been installed. The new grid absorption capacities are being undertaken, and the government has now more than 200 plus megawatts of wind and solar projects, and also hybrid projects with batteries, which are in the pipeline. So this is just to give you a quick overview. There has been various phases of the small scale scheme and the medium scale generation scheme, and the capacity installed. So basically, we were doing by learning, and gradually making the schemes more in line with the requirements of the time it was proposed. And just for information, just for last year, they had about 275 systems connected, and for a total capacity of 1.5 megawatts just for 1 year. In terms of community awareness and acceptance of energy transition, so Marina is responsible for that, and they have been promoting renewable energy at the community level. But just to point out here that for those kinds of endeavor, Mauritius does has a bit of a track record for success stories. For instance, there was a large media campaign about to change incandescent lamp into CFLs and LED lamps. So and over the period of 1 month, 2 months, with the intake of incandescent lamp, we were able to reduce the peak by 4 megawatts, and this has also a bit reflected in the acceptance of for renewable energy, in the sense that there is more and more demand for new schemes to be able to connect to the grid. And in terms of the market itself, there are around 10 or more suppliers that have experience with and that have more than 1 megawatts of capacity installed. There has been also lots of training and awareness being developed, both for students at the high school level, but also for the community in the native language. So, okay, in terms of challenges, so I think I mentioned it, I pointed it out a bit earlier. So the utility is highly influent, particularly in a small utility context. And this is where you have the bulk of the human capacity. And when you create a regulatory authority or another agency that is supposed to properly police advice, most of the human resources is already centered, is already kind of clustered within that utility. So even if you have one person who applies for the CEO position of the utility, that person will come in with a bit of bias, which is not fair, and hence it has been a bit tedious to be able to staff those institutions without having someone from the utility whose influence gonna go more towards the utility than the actual mandate of the institution. The challenges that we face also is that in terms of there was long processing times for PV connections. It used to be 12 months, but now it has gradually reduced to 6 months in terms of by the time you make an application, it's approved and it is until it is commissioned on your roof. There has been a bit of delays in terms of tendering, most notably for the wind solar farms. This is because it's so competitive and our procurement rules allows it. Usually bidders who are not awarded tend to go to arbitration. So this kind of blocks the process. So we have a few cases, and every other week we can watch live the fights in the parliament about those those projects. But probably one of the key issues here, and I know this would be more or less the same with the islands, with the Pacific Islands. The base load is the main issue. It is very expensive to have a renewable energy base load. As I said earlier, 85% of our economy depends on having reliable and affordable renewable energy. But if you want to have a base load that is provided by renewable energy, there's heavy investment required, not only on the technologies, but also on the batteries, and also on the transmission and distribution side to be able to cope with the intermittency of the power supply. So, so I mentioned about the delay in establishing the regulator. And we also found that renewable energy should work in pair with energy efficiency. You can't promote renewable energy while still being wasteful in terms of the use of the energy. And from our experience, having the catalytic support from donors, from the GEF, from the DCF, has been incremental to take those tiny steps that has allowed the country now to have a solid base to build on. Okay, so yes, that's the end of my presentation. I hope I didn't bore you. It wasn't too long, and I'm open to have any questions you might have. Thank you.
Thank you, Shakil. It was definitely not boring. It was detailed, but I think that's good because it gives an idea of how the process went in Mauritius, indeed. Maybe before, of course, this is the time. If you have any questions, feel free to unmute yourself and ask your question, or you can post it in chat. But I also wanted to sort of circle back to what we were discussing earlier and what Len was presenting, which is sort of the policy phases. And indeed, we see Mauritius, you went through, let's say, all the phases, and then you come to evaluation, and maybe there is a question to that and sort of what do you see? Are there any weak points, let's say, the evaluation phase? Because you're going, you said, okay, we're now at 21%, or we're now at the
21%.
Yeah, 21%, and you're going to 60% by 2030. It seems like, there is still, it seems like the target is increasing, but there is, it doesn't necessarily, like, there is a little bit of a gap between what is the implementation and what is the planning. So where do you see sort of what could be improved maybe in the evaluation process of the policy there?
So in terms of the understanding of how it works from start to finish, I think they have plateaued in terms of the cruising speed. So they are now, the government is now in terms of the way forward and to ensure financial sustainability, they are promoting more and more the net metering scheme. And they have also been working on the network to ensure that it has the capacity to absorb the renewable energy. So just to give you a quick example, it's we're a small countries, and sometimes you have one feeder that will be supplying a community that the transformer has a small capacity of 50 kVA. So in that it's if you allow too many connections in that particular area and it exceeds the size of the transformer, then it becomes a challenge, because any too much backflow might damage the transformer. So so this is this happens regularly, but now, since they've had the experience, they are more and more aware and where it can be expanded with how much capacity. So so they've reached a cruising speed now. So whenever they receive application, they're able to process it a bit faster and notify the applicant that they're okay, they can have the supplier come in and connect. But they're also very cautious in the sense that they don't want to have too much renewable energy and then have to have too much spinning reserves in generation, because having too much spinning reserve is an economic loss for the utility. So there's this fine tuning. I think that they would be able to reach some 30%, 35% by hopefully by the end of the 2020s, but going to 60% without some financial support for the installation of batteries and modernization of the grid, that's going to be a bit challenging. But that's the government policy how. So hopefully they will reach there.
All right, thank you. Anybody else from the participants? Do you have any question for Shakil? Of course, Shakil presentation will be available to you. I saw some questions there and the recording, so you can also still contact him after if you have any questions. Of course, you can do that through us as well. You can stop sharing the screen, maybe, Shakil, if that's okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. I'm just allowing time if people have any questions. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't put them to sleep.
Lucia, I'm going to try to share myself, but I don't know, do you see a lot of black or is it fine?
Yeah, we see the black on the side.
But is it fine or is it not readable?
But it's okay. We can,
okay.
Yeah. All right. So then we don't wait for any more questions, I guess. So we step into Len's presentations on policy cycles and some examples. Yeah. And I think a good idea here would be, if you have questions during Len's presentation, maybe you can post them in chat, or you can also
or just
so
interrupt.
Yeah. So please interrupt so we can further explain and you can understand, let's say, why these specific examples and if it's and how it's relevant maybe to your situation, as we heard some of the challenges at the beginning.
Yeah, so I won't go as detailed as Shakil, but what I liked about Shakil's presentation is because it gives you the tools. He didn't have a regulator, now they do have a regulator. So please, at islands that don't have a regulator I'm discussing, definitely get in touch with Shakil. I'm going to take you to 3 examples of islands that are in different phases of this policy cycles. And you might recognize certain aspects, although I tried to take less common islands. So I hope to be able to surprise you. As Lucia said, don't bother interrupting me. I'm going to take you through UK islands, actually Scottish islands to be really precise. And they've initiated a government program that really tries to implement this change and attract investment. So we heard the budget issues are really a challenge. We come back to that tomorrow, by the way, as well, with regards to the stakeholders. But these islands are really in that phase, okay, like initiating the change and attracting the investments. Then we go to a tiny island of Tokelau, which is a super tiny island with, I think, 1,800 people, actually 3 archipelagos, who made a change to 100% renewable, but then some challenges appeared. And then we're going to take you to the very common island of Samso, where we will also explain you how they did go from the challenge which the challenge was, how the challenge was put on the table, to where they are now. And Han already mentioned yesterday that they made a full economy out of sustainability. And that is indeed the case. And it is also super inspiring for islands in your cases. So,
Len, we
yeah,
have a question if you could enlarge the presentation screen.
I can't. The only solution to that, I'm sorry, I have this super big screen and I'm also seeing the black. However, if you share, that is solved.
Okay, but
Then I just have to annoyingly say that you have to give me the next
no,
slide.
It's not a problem, but then maybe Laura or Quentin, could you follow the chat? So that, and please interrupt in case there is any any questions, yeah? All right.
I'm going to try to address this for tomorrow, but I didn't figure it out for today.
It's okay. I'm
so
just opening your presentation.
Yeah, that's fine. It's in the same folder. Yeah.
So
there we go.
All right. Laura, can you open Len's presentation?
Can you find it, Lucia?
Maybe.
If not, I can send it to you. Share, and while
No, I can find it. It's just taking time for some reason.
Okay.
So
yeah, but while Lucia is doing that, I can already say that for the Scottish islands that we're going to start with, there are actually 6 islands on, you know, all know the form of Scotland. So they have a number of islands up there. And so these islands, some of them were selected for a program which the Scottish government put forward. And that was, you can immediately go to slide 3. Voila, the next one. There we go. So Yell, Hoy, Raasay, Barra, Great Cumbrae, and Islay were selected as one of the 6 islands in a competition to become climate neutral by 2040. Now you already see Scotland, gold, so forget about solar energy, so they had to do it differently. And the idea of the government to initiate that program was actually to have a number of them that were exemplary and that could then help the other islands. As you see on the picture, there are a lot of small islands in Scotland, and they didn't really go for, you know, the bigger ones that are typically more easy to address. They took a nice mix of everything. The idea was also to try to create local jobs by that transition to renewable energy and stimulate the local economy. And then, yeah, also those islands face the impacts of climate change. So that was the idea as well, make them more resilient. And then Scotland has very tough targets with regards to renewables and decarbonization. And the idea was that the islands would be going with that in that transition. So if you give me the next slide, I will tell you the amazing population of Yell is currently 966 people on an area of 212 square kilometers. So they mainly work on aquaculture, tourism, fishing, renewables, crafting, and I mean, that's it. Huh? So it's a very, let's say, agriculture-based local community. They have an anchor organization called the North Yell Development Council on a population of 966. You can just pick your people because you know all of them by name. But that development council runs with the wind farm. So they currently have 5 900 kilowatt turbines on the island. And they were appointed also a development officer, which is surprisingly a very young guy, Ruben. Can I have the next slide? He's very dedicated, wants to stay on the island. It's super interesting. The next slide, please. Laura?
Is it not showing?
No, I still see the same slide. We need the next slide.
Yeah, no, I did it.
I know it's frozen, I think. If it doesn't work, there's another solution. It's not the same experience, but at least we can do that. So this seems to be frozen. So I'm gonna take over.
Then I will share it because finally it opened on my screen.
So the next slide is going to show you the map of what activities they have. And so we are on slide, Lucia, slide 5. Yeah, and then slide 5. The next one. Yeah. So the previous one. I'm sorry, Lucia.
Yes, that's what I thought.
Yeah, so here you see at the size of the island, imagine again, it's 212 square kilometers, so it's actually not that small. And there is a ferry terminal, and the ferry actually consumes a lot of their energy. But they also have a number of wind turbines, and you see that there are 2 proposed wind farms as well by private investments. Statkraft is a private company. They're very willing to put renewable energy on that island. There's also a tidal area, so they're really going to put wave energy and tidal energy there. Then they have 2 ferries because they're on a line, so ferries might end on one side or on the other side of the island. And then indeed the next slide. So the current energy consumption is pretty high, 7.54 gigawatt hours for the amount of people, but there's a lot of agriculture. And there is a large amount of renewable energy generation. So you see it being substantially larger than what they consume. But that doesn't mean that they are off-grid. So they are connected to one of the other islands with a very terrible energy generation basis, so not very much renewable. But because sometimes there is no wind, they do rely on that connection to have a 24-hour supply. Next one. That went too fast, Lucia. Yeah, thank you. So here you see at the average wind speed, first of all. So on these islands, they have a very high wind speed. So that's very important as well. That's why Statkraft wants to invest on the island, especially also because it's an interconnected island. So anything that is produced on the island can be transferred to the mainland to be consumed there. So that is why it's a super interesting case to invest in. Here you see the energy consumption. And what is surprising is the large purple, which is for land use and land use change and forestry. They, at this stage, and that comes back to what I think Aruba said earlier, and I'm going to look at the mirror board as well, that it's very difficult to find data and to find accurate data. So even in a country like Scotland, where there are a massive amount of universities as well, they have difficulties at this stage to figure out why this amount is so high, and they think it is linked to peat, but it's going to be investigated further by the University of Strathclyde because they want to understand it better. Then when it comes to energy, that is mainly due to the fact that Yell is it's actually not connected to the Scottish grid, but to the Shetland Islands, to the bigger islands around it, where the production is not very sustainable at this moment. And then the transport emissions, there's not a lot of transport on the island. Half of the emissions come from the ferries that connect to the island. So they've mapped this. This is the first stage. It's a governmental support, so there's a university included that is really following up and helping them to map the things and to define where they're going to go. So on the next slide, you will see that they are looking at their implementation strategy, so how they're going to do it. So they did the carbon audit. They are currently finalizing community climate action plans. So it's a really bottom-up thing. Now, if you have 966 people, you can bring them together easily. And so the idea is really that as a community, they're going to look at the action plans, which brings to, I think, what was mentioned a couple of times in the middle board session, that you work on energy efficiency. Also, Shakil mentions working on energy efficiency. On, of course, these islands, that is super important as well. And then the next thing, so they're not yet there. Yeah, that's fine. The investment strategies. Now, challenging is is it in any case? For anyone, investment it was mentioned as one of the key ones earlier in the session. So they see that also that here is a challenge. However, because of the high amount of wind, it is actually very doable to have a wind turbine there and make it fully renewable, make it fully earned back in a very decent time. So for external investors at this stage, it's still very interesting to come and invest there. That makes it, of course, easier than for many of your islands where it's a much bigger challenge. So they're looking at different types of investments, whether it's bottom up by the citizens, or whether it is by external private investors, or it might be by the community or the municipality with a bank loan on these kind of things. They do have, of course, access to some funds like from the European Development Funds and these kind of things. But that's the stage they are in. So they're now literally looking at what do we have? What is going to be our plan? The plan is community-based plan, so they're not yet at fully having the legislation in place. So next slide. So if coming back to that, we said that the majority of the emissions with regards to energy for the houses comes from oil combustion. So they do still use a lot of oil. Of course, you can't put a natural gas network if there are only 966 people, but that is a big issue. So anything that is heat, which of course in that island is a big thing, then the important electricity from the bigger island, and then again, the data is an issue. So we do see that there's a lack of qualitative data. The emissions from ferries, which I think you're all facing, anything that comes in from boats, is often the greatest emission from the transport sector, especially because you don't often have on these islands the thing of ship to shore. As soon as it connects to the shore, it needs to connect to the electricity system. That typically doesn't happen because especially the larger ships, cruise ships, but also freight ships, have very high demands with regards to electricity, also when they're just in the harbor. And as a consequence, they keep on emitting in the harbor, which doesn't help acceptance from the people, because then the people have something like, yeah, but we have all to change and adapt. And then this big boat comes and they're just emitting in front of us. Personal vehicles are one of the greatest emitters on the road transport because they don't really have any freight transport. So that's obvious. And when they see at the data, it's not so easy to literally say which is road transport and which is the ferry transport. Waste is another thing, which again links to education. So there is what we see on these islands is even if the size and the population vary a bit, waste remains a rather constant. And that is linked to both from industry, from the agriculture industry, but also a lot of waste from the households. And that, I mean, that's an issue as well, because of course you need to get rid of it, but it also has to be processed. Agriculture, there's a lot of agriculture on the island, as said, that sometimes gives emissions as well, but it's mainly anything that is the peat that gives the waste, that gives the emissions here. So that's not easy to change. Forestry itself is mainly a carbon sink, which I think is in Mauritius also the case. But still, it's a challenge there. Okay, next slide. So you see that actually, if you take it from the Scottish government, they set the agenda that they wanted to have the 6 islands carbon neutral. They decided to formulate a policy which included freeing budget for having it guided for the technical assistance by the university for allowing to do the studies. They decided that in the policy making, so they're currently implementing what they intended to do. And in that implementation phase, they're looking at the implementation phase being the budget related to it. They will be constantly evaluated to see what needs to be changed for the other islands to pick it up on a larger scale. So that is where they are. And then we're going to the next island. And that is Tokelau. And I don't know whether there are a lot of you that know where Tokelau is, but it's a tiny, tiny island. Lucia, I think on the next slide, we do have an idea. So there are 3 archipelagos somewhere above Samoa near the Fiji Islands. And you can take me to the next one. The total population is 1,893. It's one of the smallest economies in the world. And the funny thing is, if you look it up, that their main income comes from selling dried coconut shells, postage stamps, souvenir coins, handicrafts, and money they receive from their relatives in New Zealand. So if you know that that is what they live from, you understand that it's super, super small. Until 2012, they had 3 diesel-driven power stations, one on each of the islands, and they were burning a massive amount for a total of $800,000 per year. So on one of the climate conferences in Durban, the leader of the islands said, okay, we commit to 100% renewable energy by 2012. They got a 7 million loan from New Zealand, but it was actually very profitable because bringing the oil to the island was the main challenge. So if they wouldn't have changed their energy consumption, it would have been paid back within 9 years. In 2012, they were hence the first country in the world to produce 100% of its electricity from the sun. And they used 3 PV plants for it, which a total of 1 megawatt, so about 4,000 panels, a massive amount of batteries and inverters. And as that came on, then they do have a backup generator on coconut oil, so on biomass. But the point now is that they had 24-hour-a-day access to electricity. And that is something they didn't have before. So indeed, when you would evaluate their policy, they did the agenda setting. They were super fast from going from agenda setting to getting the political agreement and doing it. But then what they saw, and it's actually where they stopped, but this is where they should do the cycle again, they saw that people started buying refrigerators and air conditioning units because all of a sudden they had 100% reliable electricity. And that increased the electricity consumption. So they're now again at something like 60 to 70%, which is still very good, but they're not completely there. So you see the relevance, and we're talking about 2012, you see the relevance of going back to them. And Lucia, I'm going to go quickly through SAMSO because that gives an introduction for
I was going
tomorrow.
to ask you, because maybe I just wanted to take a short break just in case people had questions, because indeed we'll also have a chance to hear about SAMSO tomorrow during
So maybe I skip SAMSO, that's fine.
So that's what I, but I also wanted to check if anybody has any questions. I didn't see any questions in chat, so I'm assuming no burning questions.
Then I want you to go to the last slide, because we're coming back to that as well, to slide 25, to show the importance of what a government can do. So slide 25.
Just have to walk through them, and that's okay.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, right. I'll tell you to stop. There we go. So what you see here, and we're going to go in detail a bit more in the next sessions, on the one, what you see in the table, the non-supported initiatives or citizen-led initiatives that jointly invested in solar PV or a wind turbine. And then you see the ones that were supported by the government. And supported by the government could be initial piece of money. It could be helping them with planning, helping them with the permitting. It could be a combination of both. It could be, that they were helped by a knowledge institute. But you see the difference. So you see the amount of projects that are implemented after a couple of years are substantially higher if the government helps them. But you also see that the amount of people that are in it are substantially more when the government helps them. And that is super important, you see that the amount of PV and wind turbines and district heating, which is of course less relevant for islands, that is substantially higher. You see the size of the PV plant on average for such a community, when it's not supported, is only about 100 kilowatt. When the government does provide them support, it is 2,471 kilowatt peak on average. And that is where we tomorrow will introduce you to what stakeholders can do, and that when it comes to the budget implementation, it doesn't need to come from the local citizens only, it can come from throughout the world, but that there is really that bottom-up participation, that if you allow it, if you kind of foster it, it can grow, and it doesn't need to be on residential roofs. It can be really that joint investment in a solar park or that joint investment in a wind turbine. And that is something that is really the difference of supporting them, enabling them versus not. That policy power is really shown in the data. So that's where I give the floor back to Lucia.
Thanks, Len. I stop sharing here. All right, we'll definitely share Len's slides afterwards, so you can also walk through the SAMSO example that Len had there. I think with that, I would like to close for today. I assume there is no burning questions unless somebody has a question they want to still ask. Please feel free to do that. If not, we continue tomorrow with the third workshop, and it's going to be on institutional framework and stakeholder engagement. And we've heard some of that today now from Len, but also earlier when we're discussing the challenges, we heard about the local population, local stakeholders getting involved. And indeed, Len now gave a bit of that comment that it doesn't necessarily only have to be local citizens getting involved to put solar on their roof, but they could also have share in a larger park, which maybe is they're partially owners of it, which we mentioned earlier. So these sort of different types of initiatives you'll hear about tomorrow as well. I want to thank you today for your time and for your participation as well. And as I mentioned at the beginning, we'll be sharing the video presentations and also a form to ask for your input and your comments. And maybe, as I asked yesterday, for the people that are still here with us, if you don't mind turning on your video so we could take a group picture, that would be very helpful. Thanks. And thank you for your time.
Yeah, so in the quality survey, we got a few very interesting replies. So just be blunt. That helps us to adjust to what you really need. We're trying to find what works for all of you. So just, be blunt. Don't hesitate on that. Because you see we adapted today versus yesterday. We're happy to do that again, but it helps really if you're just explicit about what you want or what you prefer.
What you want to see more, yeah.
Yeah.
Or less.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you so much. And thank you for joining us also in the Miro board. That Miro board is still available. So if you want to go back to it and check it out, feel free to do that. And we see you tomorrow.
Thank you.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Thank you.
Okay,
Bye-bye.